Hi Time Warpers, welcome back to the golden age of musical theater.
I'm not falling for that again. There wasn't a book with a bunch of great American songs. So what's the story with the gold?
You are right, my gullible friend. Normal people might not be able to take this gold to the bank, but in terms of musical theater, this era produced solid gold. The Time Warp timeline moves us to the years between 1940 and 1960. And the show that introduced us to this era was Oklahoma.
Okay, so what's the difference between now and then?
I'm so glad you asked. As is true with most periods in history, the era wouldn't be defined until well after it was over. On the whole, these shows, their characters, and their plot lines spoke to the values and ideals of the middle class as opposed to the elitist characters in operetta. Tin Pan Alley musicals had storylines, but the storylines of these new musicals were more in-depth. What we would call the script for a stage play would be called a book for a musical.
So if the stories weren't fantasies or plots about royalty, what were they about?
Well, the audience was skewing younger, so the characters in the shows skewed younger.
That tracks.
And plots followed a moral struggle. As the center of the plot, there was more emphasis on the goodness of humanity. There would be a bad guy at the center of the conflict, but the good guys would choose the appropriate moral path, and everyone would live happily ever after. Except for maybe the bad guy, but whatever, good guys win, yay!
So young characters, no fairy tales, but the good guy makes the right moral choice and everyone lives happily ever after? That's Golden Age?
No! There is way more involved. Dance became a fundamental element of the storytelling. Drama was more important than comedy, although there were definitely comedic performances. But songs in these shows helped develop the characters and expanded on the storyline. The songs weren't standalone hits anymore. Now the songs moved the story along, as if they were so much feeling from the character that they had to sing rather than speak the lines.
So that sounds intense. I thought musicals were used for escapism.
They were, but they were also a grounding in reality. Settings were no longer castles. These shows were set in hometown places like in Middle America, or a fishing town on the coast of Maine, or they might be set in exotic places like South Pacific or Siam, but the characters would be down to earth, normal people like teachers or soldiers, blue-collar workers or cowhands. Women were stronger figures who showed more independence and broke the traditional normal boundaries placed on women. They were still domestic supporters of their men, but they also had something important to say and do in the storyline.
Okay, now I need to know about these shows.
Well, the earliest example of this new musical was Oklahoma, written by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein II. The setting was in Oklahoma Territory at the time that it was heading towards becoming a state. The main characters were cowhands, or farmers. Love was a central part of the story, but not the main part. You had a bad guy, Judd Fry, a farmer hand, who was in love with the lovely Lori, the niece of the farm owner. But Lori was in love with a rugged cowhand, who also happened to be in love with her. There was some serious drama, including a potential murder charge, but spoiler alert, they all lived happily ever after.
Wow.
Yeah. There was also Carousel by Rodgers and Hammerstein. That was set in Maine. The female character is a battered wife who finds out she is pregnant right before her bad boy husband is killed during a crime he was committing. It's tough, but spoiler alert.
Let me guess. Happily ever after?
Yep, then there was South Pacific, written by Rodgers and Hammerstein. That was about a soldier and a nurse. That ending was a little more sad, but it spoke to the value of doing the right thing and honoring your country.
Wow.
Ooh, and we can't forget about The Sound of Music, or The King and I. The Sound of Music was set in Austria where the bad guys were the Nazis, and the good guy was a nun in training who fell in love with the widowed father of 7 children she was caring for as a governess. And The King and I was about a British teacher who was also recently widowed and moved to Siam with her young son so she could be the teacher of many children of the king, but ended up really teaching the king a thing or two also. Those were written by...
Let me guess. Rodgers and Hammerstein? Why didn't they name this period after those guys? Did anyone else write any musicals in the Golden Age?
Yes, but R&H, as they are commonly called, were a huge part of the era. Other important shows were My Fair Lady by Alan Lerner and Frederick Loewe. Kiss Me Kate with music and lyrics by Cole Porter, and West Side Story by Leonard Bernstein. All of these shows have been done as revivals in our modern age of musical theater, but Golden Age musicals had a specific vocal style that included wider vocal ranges, requiring strong singers, but also required clear diction because the story was key. Today, we call that type of singing legit musical theater.
It sounds perfect. How did it change?
Well, it is argued that the last big show written in the Golden Age style was Fiddler on the Roof by, wanna guess? Just kidding. It was Jerry Bach and Sheldon Harnick.
What came next?
You are going to have to join us for the next chapter in Time Warp to see what comes after gold.